Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and thanks for watching. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about higher education, public higher education, I should add. But first, my special guest this week is United States Senator Bob Casey. How about gun legislation and more? We'll get to that after these words.
Welcome to the fast-paced and unrehearsed weekly discussion featuring the leaders who help shape your world. Join us as we address the issues that impact you each and every day. This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Senator, thanks for joining me today. I know you are, to put it bluntly, crazy busy, and we do appreciate your coming on the program as always.
Well, Terry, it's great to be with you. Thank you.
All right, well, let's start with, I think, the biggest news out of Washington this week is gun legislation. It looks like, obviously, it has bipartisan support. Some Democrats say it doesn't go far enough. Some Republicans say it goes too far. But your leaders have said, we've got to get something done. Let's go ahead and do it. So what are the major elements in the gun legislation?
Well, Terry, first of all, I think we have to recognize the circumstance we face as Americans now. You've got gun violence being the leading cause of death among American children and adolescents. That's never happened in American history. And too often what Washington has done, what a lot of members of the House and the Senate have decided to do over time, is to surrender to the problem. Say there's nothing we can do. Nothing. That's been the attitude here in Washington for far too long. Finally, we have a breakthrough. Now, what this bill has in it is nowhere near what I would want in terms of common sense gun measures, but it is a step in the right direction in terms of providing some measures that will save lives. For example, closing a loophole that's known by the simple phrase boyfriend loophole. So if you're a spouse and you commit an act of gun violence against your wife, you could have your gun taken away from you.
Right.
But if you're only the boyfriend, that doesn't affect you. So plugging that loophole is significant, and that's in this bill. The other part about it is taking a look at the juvenile records of 18 and 19 and 20-year-olds, because we know that the shooter, the killer in Uvalde, as well as other killers, if the authorities had time to review their background, even for a short period of time, may be able to find problems. So that's a significant step on background checks, but it's not the full measure of what we need, the full background check legislation that so many of us support. The investments in mental health in this bill are unprecedented. We've never had new dollars at this level and new authority to wrestle with so many mental health issues and to invest in community-based treatment. So that's just a quick summary of some of the highlights.
Sure.
But it's a step in the right direction. It's a hell of a lot better than doing nothing, right, which is what Washington has done for the last 25 years.
Yeah, and over in the House, some Republicans have raised concerns because they say it goes too far. But obviously, the Democrats control the chamber, and it looks like it should pass. And I think President Biden is he wants to go further, but it looks, as you accurately point out and rightfully point out, it's a step in the right direction.
It is, and I think it's noteworthy, Terry. The NRA opposed every word of this bill, not just the gun provisions. They opposed every part of this bill. And they are not going to prevail in this. Common sense Americans have demanded for so long that we pass common sense measures. And I think we're at that point now. But it has to be the beginning, a start, not the end of the conversation. We have a long way to go.
All right. Well, Senator, the other thing is we talk a lot about red flag laws. I mean, there's all sorts of aspects of an individual's background that clearly indicates they should not be carrying a weapon. I mean, that's common sense, it seems to me. Whether you're a gun advocate or not, I'm not making that point. I'm just saying there are certain things that make a lot of sense.
Well, that's one of the issues, and I should have mentioned that in my brief list.
That's fine.
That's one of the areas where not only will there be an opportunity here, but in terms of policy, but money, $750 million for states to implement red flag laws. Now, the more technical term is extreme risk protection orders. And what that means is if someone is making it very clear to their community or the people around them, their family or coworkers or others, that they're going to commit an act of violence, gun violence, or they're headed in that direction, those individuals around them can petition a court, and there is a hearing. So it's a full due process opportunity for someone to make that case to a judge, and then the judge makes the determination. Yeah. So this allows those kinds of orders to be in place, and it's not a permanent removal of the weapon. It's a removal of the weapon for a period of time until a judge can make a determination. So that's also provided in this bill. There's money behind it.
We're going to run to a break. When we come back, Senator, I want to talk about honoring veterans exposed to toxins. I know that's an important issue, and we'll get to that after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Welcome back. My special guest this week is U.S. Senator Bob Casey. Senator Casey, let's talk about something I know that you've worked on, and that is what I'll call it this, honoring veterans who are exposed to toxins. Tell our viewers what that is about and why it's important.
Well, it's a terrible problem that veterans face after serving in places like Iraq and Afghanistan, where you had these toxic burn pits that were burning all kinds of material, whether it was medical waste or other waste, and they were exposed, and millions of them exposed to it, and no real game plan to help them. And so many of these veterans not only needed quality health care to deal with that exposure, but also to prevent them from dying from it. And so many veterans never got the help that they needed. We had contact with Michelle Laird. Her husband Scott was exposed, and she made the case to us, like so many Americans. So people in both parties in the House and the Senate came together, and the word that's used in the legislation is pact, which of course conveys that sense of promise. We have to keep our promise to these veterans that they're going to have the kind of health care they deserve, having been exposed to those toxic burn pits. So here's what it does. It'll expand the VA healthcare eligibility to more than 3.5 million toxic exposed veterans by extending the period of their enhanced eligibility for healthcare. So that's one thing it does. But the way that is done is by adding 23. Imagine how many conditions this is. 23 burn pit and toxic exposure related conditions to a presumption list. So you don't have to walk in the door and say, I'm a veteran, I was in Iraq and I was exposed to a burn pit. There is a presumption that you carry with you pursuant to this new law, right, that will allow you to get the health care that you need. So that's among the things that it does. It's long overdue, but I want to commend John Tester, the head of the chairman of the Veterans Committee, working with his Republican counterpart to get this.
Right. Now, it's passed the House. Is it in the Senate right now? I mean, it's passed the Senate. It is in the House right now. It looks like that should pass easily. Am I right or wrong about that?
There won't be any question about voting for it in terms of support. There's overwhelming support. There's some technical issues the House has to work through, but I think it'll become law. I just don't know when exactly that'll happen.
We're almost out of time, but I want those of us who live in the cities or the suburbs may not be familiar with the broadband problems in rural Pennsylvania, and we have a lot of rural Pennsylvania. It's a big state. Go ahead, take it.
Well, Terry, as you know, out of our 67 counties, 48 are rural, and in a lot of those communities, there's no broadband at all, no high-speed internet coverage, or it's spotty or limited, and that especially affects our kids in school. It was made worse during the pandemic. All those stories about kids driving to a McDonald's parking lot to do their homework and things like that, example after example. But it also affects small businesses and farmers. And one of the best descriptions I ever heard was by Denny Wolf. Denny's one of our former ag secretaries in Pennsylvania. Here's what he wrote. He said, quote, "Farmers rely on GPS technology to maximize their growing season and ensure that their equipment is working correctly." He talks about precision agriculture. Right. They need high-speed internet to operate a farm. We've got to make sure we have the
great point.
The infrastructure bill has it, but we got to make sure the dollars get to these communities.
Thank you. Thanks for coming on, and hope to see you soon. And all right, after the break, we'll be back. We're going to talk about public higher education in the state of Pennsylvania after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Cross-State Credit Union Association. Credit unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, go to ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculties, representing the faculty and coaches who are devoted to providing quality public higher education for Pennsylvania's college students.
Well, let's talk a little bit about public higher education. Joining me to do that is Ken Mash. He's the president of the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculties. Some 90,000 students across the state of Pennsylvania in the 14 publicly owned universities, correct?
Absolutely.
And they come from all parts of our state.
They come from everywhere, from our state, from out of state, a little bit, but we are the institutions that really serve Pennsylvanians.
Yeah. Look, we often talk about what people do and how they do it, and you obviously spent a good bit of your life in the classroom up at, what's that place called? East Stroudsburg? How could I get that? Go ahead.
I don't know how you can get
So what's going on?
So I was president of ABSCUF, and it's a full-time job. Right. There's a tradition, as you know, of stepping down after 6 years. And I did that. Dr. Jamie Martin took my place as president. Unfortunately, she has some health issues and had to step aside.
And she's been on the program.
Yeah. So I decided, along with her, that I would run one more time. But in between, I had the great experience to do what I love, which is to go back and to teach students. And it was great. Of course, it was amid all the challenges that surrounded the pandemic.
COVID.
Yeah. We were online for the first semester that I was teaching, and the second semester too. And then in the second year, we came back, and it really did pose a whole lot of problems for faculty, for students.
Yeah.
I am so proud of my colleagues for the fact that they really hung in there. They did what they needed to do to serve the students. They've gone the extra mile to help students out. And even, this year, as we went back face to face, we're still dealing with students, many of whom, missed their senior year in high school and were online. then were online for their first year, and they really didn't have an opportunity to be socialized into college life. And so they really needed extra help and extra concern, and they probably will continue to need that. And that's something that we really all need to pay attention to.
Governor Wolf and the leaders in the state legislature are obviously now seriously dealing with the Pennsylvania budget. A couple of weeks ago, we had Speaker of the House Brian Cutler on the program, and he said there's about a $10 billion surplus. And obviously, the education community, both basic ed and higher ed, are looking for an increase in their budgets. What's your sense about that?
Well, we remain optimistic. We were hopeful that the budget would be done by now.
I know.
It's not done by now, but we're still optimistic that we're going to get, a 15% increase. Everything that we've heard has been positive for the state system, including additional money from the ARP funds from the federal government, and also potentially for the governor's Nellie Bly Scholarship Program, which would go to help our students and community college students to make college more affordable, which we desperately need.
Yeah, that's certainly a good point. Now, I spent my whole career in higher education, so I'm a little biased when it comes to this subject of support for education. The fact of the matter is that this topic is extremely important, not just for the students, but for the economies of the region in which these students serve. Well, hold on. They tell me we're going to run to a break. We'll get to a break. We'll get to that question after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine.
Welcome back. I'm chatting with Ken Mash. He's the president of APSCUF. That's the association that represents the faculty in the public university system, often referred to correctly as the Pennsylvania state system of higher education.
Right.
All right. We talk about the educational aspects of the state system, and that's hugely important given 90,000 students and they turn over, and many of them remain in the state, important to the economy of the state. But also, given the geographic dispersion of the universities, these universities are extremely important economically to the regions in which they reside.
Absolutely. Our universities and the campuses now, since there's been some combination, but they are in rural areas. They are often the #1 employer in their community. On top of that, those areas do depend on students graduating from our programs to, be in healthcare, to be teachers. There is, when our universities get hurt, it directly impacts the communities like in Clarion, Pennsylvania, and in Mansfield, Pennsylvania. I heard you talking to the senator earlier, about how rural Pennsylvania is. We reach into those rural areas to provide a high-quality education to students who really probably would not make the trip or leave their communities to go and pursue a better life.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the state system itself and where it's heading and what's likely to happen over the next couple of years. So what do you think are 3 or 4 major highlights that you would cite?
Well, right now we are, of course, dealing with the fact that 6 universities are combining into 2 universities. So we're going to maintain the campuses that exist. And that's not a simple process, as you well know. Involves all kinds of things like, it's leadership structures, curriculum, enrollment, right? That's a major thing that's going on in our system right now. And of course, our universities have been, frankly, underfunded. The reports have just recently came out, and Pennsylvania is still near the bottom when it comes to funding public higher education. We rank 50th by U.S. News and World Report, not because of quality issues or anything like that, but because of cost and because of student debt issues. Right. So we appreciate the fact that there seems to be bipartisan support for increasing funding for the state system, but we want to, remember the context, and that is that we have been so far behind in funding. Our office, we figured that it would take a 50% increase in funding for our system to get us in the median among all the states. That is, to pull us up to halfway in comparison with the other states, because we're down around 47, 48.
Right. Do I understand that tuition is frozen too? For this coming year semester? Yeah. Is this the 4th year, I think, that this has occurred?
Right. So I'm not sure that they have set tuition yet for next year, but I do know that the board is aiming to keep tuition where it is, and they have done it for 4 years. And again, people should appreciate that's hard, and everyday families now are feeling the impact of inflation.
Sure.
So obviously, if we're not getting more money in, it means that we have to make do with what we have, which is quite difficult.
Here's something that I often think about, given my long career in higher ed. Is what students study changing over the course of time?
Well,
in terms, is it more science and technology now, given what's going on in our economy?
I think it's always been segmented. So, you have your students who are interested in social science and humanities and finance, and, and that really doesn't change. It can momentarily change. Things become fads. But the bottom line is that we're there to provide, a wide array of options for students for them to be able to be successful. And really, it's the honor of my members, our faculty, our coaches, to be able to, have that kind of direct impact on the lives of students.
And I have to mention where the teachers in basic education come from in the state of Pennsylvania.
And we have to deal with the teacher shortage now. And,
that's a good point.
And we had a lot of cutbacks in those teacher education departments. So we need to strengthen them and make sure that we're able to provide enough teachers for Pennsylvania.
Yeah, and but some majors have more. I don't want to say economic relevance, but you're absolutely right in the fact that it has to cover the gamut of education experiences.
Yeah, and what people fail to understand sometimes is, even though you can't directly connect the dots, a sound liberal arts education actually helps you no matter what you're.
Thanks for coming in. All right, we'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, stay well.